Hey there, friends. Welcome back to our fourth episode of The Catholic Faith and Public Life. I hope you're well this week. I am here again flanked by my patron saints, Our Lady, right? Our Lady of Perpetual Help, the star of the new evangelization, and St. John Paul the Great, whose feast day it is today. John Paul the Great, a great student of history, a great philosopher, and a great proponent of people engaging well in public life, in politics. And that's what we're trying to do here today. So we definitely ask for the intercession of St. John Paul the Great over our session today, over our efforts to pray through this time especially in America, and to lead us into a way, right? Lead us along the way of moving past election 2020 when it's over and done with, right? And really moving forward so that the common good can flourish in ourselves, in our social groups, in our country, and in our world. So for the last several weeks, we've been kind of focusing on big picture principles and truths that can help us engage public life well, and we're going to do a little bit of that today, but really we're going to get down a little more specific with some of the ways that we ought to be thinking about political candidates and political parties and things like that in America in 2020. So basically what I'm going to do, I'm not going to tell you who you should vote for, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you principles that I think make it pretty clear what we can do and can't do in the way of voting, and who we perhaps should consider casting our vote for, or at least who we definitely that we definitely can't cast a vote for. Okay, so that's what I'm doing today. It might be slightly longer than last week, but I hope not too much, because I know I've been going a little bit long each of these times, and I hope that's okay with you. So the next thing I want to ask you is, if these are beneficial to you, please share them with others. I really do, not because I want to be famous, but because I want the truth to be known, right? My whole my website, my whole MO is to seek truth, goodness, and beauty, right? Those three transcendentals. And I want to help you seek truth, goodness, and beauty too. So hopefully we can find some truth, goodness, and beauty today by what we talk about. So let's just dive right in. The Catholic faith gives us a number of principles by which we should be thinking about our public, social, and political life, right? The common term is Catholic social thought or Catholic social teaching, and I'm going to share some of those principles with you, along with my conclusions about them, along the way. So the very first principle of Catholic social teaching is that we must respect the dignity of human life, right? Every human life is sacred. There is not a single human life that doesn't have equal dignity and inviolable dignity, right? Every human life is sacred from conception to natural death, right? And that's why, for example, the people of faith are so intent on ensuring that abortion is not part of our legal landscape, right? So one thing is interesting. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were doing a reflection on why abortion is necessary, for example. And the man who they were interviewing was a father of a child that he said had to be aborted because of the health of his wife, the health of the mother. And I was thinking in my head the whole time, actually, that's not an abortion, right? By the teaching of the church, that's not an abortion. That is something else. That's a different category, right? The abortion is the direct intentional killing of human life, right? And in that case, they didn't intend it. it was a result of another procedure. That anyway, so that's a big kind of distinction that has to be made, right? And I was teaching some college students and made the connection between life in the womb being respected and life being respected among slave populations, for example, in American history. And one of the students raised her hand and said, "Well, I think there's a distinction to be made, a big difference between clearly knowing that the slave is a human being and clearly knowing that the fetus is a human being." And she is right. There has to be a distinction, but we have to be able to understand that slave began as a fetus, right? Latin for baby, right? That human life, all of it which must be respected, from the least to the greatest, to the richest, to the poorest, no matter our skin color, right? All of it must be respected. Every one of those human lives began in the womb at conception, right? The meeting of the male cell and the female cell, okay? So the point being that all human life begins there, and all human life must be fostered and respected. We as people of faith cannot support candidates and parties that are not cautious with this, are not protective of life at every phase from conception to natural death, right? Unless you think that put me in a particular party, right? I am not. That is an independent principle that is true across the board for every human being, right? We've got to take care of life from conception to natural death, okay? The second principle that flows directly from that, it hangs from it, right, is the fostering of the life of the family. The fostering of the life of the family. Because if we don't foster the life of the family, we are not going to protect the dignity of every human life, right? It's just not going to happen, because human life is first and foremost protected not by the government, not by social programs, but within the family, with a mother and a father, who children have a right to both, right? That's the way that the Lord intended it. He did not intend for children to be raised without mother and father. And yes, I know that certain tragedies happen, right? And we have to look for surrogates in some way. But we can't just make our own rules and our own laws and think that we know, specifically what the Lord intended, or we can bend that, right? That's why, for example, the definition of marriage is so important. One man, one woman, till death do they part, right? That's the definition of marriage, because that is what fosters and protects the dignity of every human person from conception to natural death best, right? And I'm not saying it happens perfectly in every situation. We're sinners, right? And we mess up, and people are broken, and they harm others, even within families. Yes, there are cases of abuse, and there's divorce, and all that ugly stuff that happens in our world. But just because brokenness happens, and just because, ugliness happens, doesn't mean we throw the baby out with the bathwater. I was in a online kind of conversation with a family member, actually, who was pro homosexual unions, right? Homosexual marriage, so-called. And I clearly told him that I was against that. And he responded with something about a famous personality who had a family, right, that was made up of porn stars and whatever. And he said, so that's such a great example of family. Why do we need to have your definition of family, right? And I said, cousin, right? It was my cousin. I said, cousin, let's take math, for example, right? And let's just say that we've got a bunch of horrible math teachers, right? I like math. I was good at math. I didn't particularly care for it, but I was good at it. And but let's just say I had really horrible math teachers, right? Does that mean that I reject math altogether? No. what do I do if I have horrible math teachers and I need to have a better example of how to do math? I find better math teachers, right? I don't throw out math altogether because there is truth there. There is, a grounding of reality there. And it's the same with marriage. Yes, we in our world have some really, really poor examples of marriage, but that doesn't mean we redefine marriage to be something that it is not. We need to look for good, holy examples of marriage. And that's why, for example, John Paul the Great, right, wrote his Theology of the Body, that was a way of helping humanity understand itself, as a whole, very rightly, but also the sacrament of marriage, the union between man and woman, okay? Other principles that flow from this, right? So we've got the protection of the dignity of all human life from conception to natural death, the fostering of family in its proper, true definition, right? And then what flows from this? We also have to protect the rights of property. And this, again, hangs from the previous principle, protection of the family and protection of human dignity. Because if we as individuals don't have the right to private property, how are we going to be able to take care of our family? And how are we going to be able to foster the dignity of that human life, even in the womb, right? So, the protection of property rights. And I will just tell you that there has never been a government, no matter the stripe, right? Whether it be a communist government or a capitalist, economic system, there's never been a government that has taken care of the family and protected dignity and provided property rights better than the family knows how to do at the smallest level, the most local level, right? And that brings us to the next principle of subsidiarity, right? The principle of subsidiarity says things should be taken care of at the lowest possible level, right? So if my family can solve a problem, I don't need to go to the state or the federal government, right? We can solve that within the family. And this is something that our modern American political scene really has just lost touch with, right? There's one party that does it a little bit better than the other, but one party has completely gone, the way of collectivism and big government, right? That is not going to be the solution to our problems, right? Personally, I'm a little more of a libertarian personality. Like, I or you, any of us, should be personally virtuous enough to be able to care for things properly at the lowest possible level, right? And yes, I do understand that there are certain things that, we have to expand because they involve more people, Yes, I got all that. And that's where the next principle of solidarity comes in. Now, I spoke of solidarity in one of my previous episodes, but I want to reiterate, the virtue of solidarity is the virtue that causes me to look across boundaries, any boundary, and say that person is my brother or my sister, right? Whether they be boundaries of race, economic class, gender, geography, right? But the reality is that I can only live solidarity at the lowest possible level in subsidiarity, right? I can't save, quote unquote, the whole world. I can only do what I can do at the lowest possible level, okay? And so this is where arguments for like states' rights come in, for example, right? That we don't need to be farming things out and having the federal government take a large role in a lot of things, right? We need those issues to be dealt with and those plans to be made at more local levels, right? Just keep solidarity and subsidiarity in your mind as you listen to, for example, the debate tonight, right? Donald Trump and Joe Biden are going to have their final debate this evening. St. John Paul the Great, help them, help us, right? And another great principle then, after that is care for the poor, right? We do that in solidarity. But remember, I don't do it for the universe. I do it as I can do it at a local level, right? And maybe I do have the opportunity to go to a foreign country and do something personally, but that doesn't need to be financed by the government, right? That needs to be, financed by my family or by my church community or, whatever that might be, right? So we do need to take care of the poor, right? This is always one of the great arguments when it comes to respecting life. In order to respect all human life from conception to natural death, that's going to mean that we take care of the poor, because there are some who are born into or negative situations develop over the course of their lives, and we, to whatever extent we are able, must minister into that, right? And I would simply tell you that any candidate or any party that says we're going to force you to do that, right, is not operating in accord with Catholic social doctrine particularly, or just good reason, right? Even passing laws about how poverty is going to be eradicated and dealt with are not terribly effective, especially at the federal level, right? I'm a historian, right? And the war on poverty, which came out of a presidential administration in the 1960s, we can say has been an utter failure, right? Why? Because they try to do that from the top down instead of enabling things at the lowest level, right? Reducing regulations on and allowing families to flourish and even have more money, right? So that we can engage at a community level in eradicating poverty, right? Those are the ways that Catholics need to be thinking of this. And I will just tell you very simply that there are candidates over the course of recent history, including in our own election, who purport to be faithful Catholics. And I will tell you that everything I see, it is absolutely not true, right? And I'm not just talking about the abortion issue, right? I am talking about all of their stances on family and the common good and subsidiarity, right? Religious freedom is another one, right? That, is definitely under attack. And, our Catholic faith says that every person must have the freedom to pursue religion, to pursue truth, goodness, and beauty in the way that they find most effective, in the way that they find fit, right? And the Catholic faith believes that if somebody does that honestly, God is ultimately going to lead that person or that group to himself most fully, right? We trust in God's providence to do that. So, with that, the last thing I want to say is, how do we approach these last 2 weeks or so? We're down to like 13 days until the election, right? How do we approach these last 2 weeks before the election? Number one, we need to avail ourselves frequently, even every day if possible, of the grace of the sacraments, right? We need, as Catholics, to be frequenting reconciliation and the Eucharist particularly, right? And what that's going to do is that's going to free us of the sins that are in our lives and put us in a state of grace to be able to deal with individuals more charitably and more effectively, right? Even if they disagree with us, we can meet them as brothers and sisters and say, you know what? We may not agree, but let's walk together trying to make a better world, right? And the last thing that I really want to leave you with is a beautiful reflection, a beautiful quote from Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa, that great advocate, that great exemplar of Catholic social teaching, of the virtues of Catholic social teaching, right? She said, "We must be contemplatives in the heart of the world." We must be contemplatives in the heart of the world. as we go through these last 2 weeks, I urge you to be a contemplative in the heart of the world, right? We may not need to, or it may not be fruitful to engage in every argument that comes our way. Goodness knows, if we get on social media, there's going to be a million arguments between now and November 3rd. Maybe we refrain from those. Maybe we don't get on social media, right, for the next week or for the week after the election, right? And Mother Teresa goes on in that same reflection, and she says, be the good news. Be the good news to your own people first. Be the good news to your family first. Be the good news, as Mother Teresa says in the next sentence. Find out about your next door neighbors. Be the good news to your next door neighbors. How many of us haven't even met our next door neighbors, right? Yours truly included on one side, right? So, it's always incumbent upon us to go engage in relationship first so that we can be the good news and develop that relationship so that eventually we might be able to share these more, public points, right? These points of public life and social teaching. So, I urge you, continue to pray to Our Lady of Perpetual Help, continue to pray to St. John Paul the Great, continue to pray to Mother Teresa for our nation, for our world, for the transformation of our culture, that we might be able to live the gospel and share that social teaching that is for the common good with anyone we come in contact with. If you want more, visit my website, DerekRotty.com. If you want to send me an email, if you want to engage in a deeper conversation, I welcome that. Until next week, God bless you. St. John Paul the Great, pray for us.